We're not here to have a good time. We're here to be tested. We're here to be pushed. We come into this venue for the sake of growing our sentience. That's how I ended up dead at the age of 20. I had gone out horseback riding with a friend, and we had caught the mare very easily. Her name was Ticker, and she really enjoyed people, so she was no trouble to catch. But that day, I had forgotten to bring the grain to catch the stallion, and the stallion didn't like me to begin with. So I thought I would ride Ticker and chase him, because she was a barrel mare and very maneuverable. Thought I would chase him into the smaller paddock where we would catch him. And both Michael inwardly and the friend I was there with said it wasn't a good idea. But I thought, I was young, I was strong, I was immortal, I was made of rubber, I bounced very well, so I was going to try it anyway. And here I am chasing very close behind him in a hard gallop. I'm more or less standing in the stirrups bent-kneed with the saddle thumping me in the bottom every time the horse takes a stride, with my face down close to the neck, and everything suddenly slips into slow motion. Now, this has been recurring all my life. When something's about to go down, I know, because time warps and everything goes into slow motion. And very vividly, I remember seeing the horse's rump coming up and hearing Michael inwardly conveying, he's kicking. And I said, so what? He can't get me up here. Well, I was very wrong. I disembodied as I saw the hoof approaching my face, his right rear hoof approaching my face. And I disembodied, so I never felt it. I rolled left, and I'd made a habit of disembodying most of my life. When there was stress of any sort, I'd just leave. So I rolled left, and I went about 100 feet away, and turned around, and I looked back, and I watched in really slow motion, so slow motion it was like a series of still frames, click, 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 as the body was kicked, let go of the reins, right? Went limp, and the horse, and went backwards as the horse I was riding ran in very, very slow motion out from underneath the body. The body, I'm thinking as I watch it, because she's flopping on the rump of the horse with every stride, and I'm thinking, gosh, I hope the feet don't get stuck in the stirrups. She'll get dragged. And they didn't. And the body went over head first, over the rump, landed head and neck at the same time, shoulders, and then hips. And then the legs hit with a really dispiriting thud. And I remember the dust and dirt flying up around just a kaboom, as it was vivid. And suddenly I was in a lustrous vast, and it was velvety and black, but it had this sheen that was like gasoline on water in the sunshine. And it had a taste, so to speak. I've always tasted people's emotions, okay, and I've always tasted their vibrational field. It was very interesting, but it was infused with this benevolence, and I felt perfect. I mean, absolutely, I felt my perfect self, the way I had been created before any of the conditioning the earth puts on us, stories we begin to tell ourselves based on what we learned in Earth Venue. And I said, I'm perfect. I'm perfect. Nothing can ever hurt me again. And then I became aware of Michael, and he said, nothing could have ever hurt you to begin with. You're an eternal being. And I tasted the truth of what he was saying. And I knew he was telling me the truth. And I said, well, that being true, and I can taste that it is, why was it also scary? And he said, it was scary because you believed you could suffer loss and die. But we had to intensify the experience with that fear, that belief, in order for you to take it seriously, to inundate your sensorium, basically, so that you would learn what you went there to learn and do what you went there to do. And I said, I don't remember what I went there to do. Can you please tell me? And he said, you went to summon your will. And I said, summon my will? You mean I went through all of that suffering just to learn what I want? And he said, no, you misinterpret what I mean by your will. Okay, so suddenly, he said, I have to show you. So suddenly, most people have, when they have these experiences, they like watch a movie of their life review. That's not what happened with me. I went from the lustrous vast back into my timeline. I was a little baby, 18 months old again. And my mother had just put my first pair of new shoes on me. And I thought I was being punished or that I was tied to the floor. I was weeping and screaming and carrying on because I just really hated the shoes. They were very uncomfortable. And then I was also my mother, and I experienced her feelings of sympathy for me and compassion at the same time she was concerned, because she'd saved for a while. We were a poor family, and she'd saved for a while to get me these shoes, and it meant a lot to her to give them to me to protect my feet. And here was me having a horrible reaction. And she wasn't upset about it. She was just concerned for me. And in this holy perception, and holy perception meaning I experienced my feelings as myself again and observed my feelings objectively. And I experienced my mother's feelings as if I were her, and I observed her objectively. It was holy perception. I realized the shoes had been given to protect my feet, and that it was a blessed thing, and that I had made the experience, by the way I labeled it, a terrible thing. I had, in effect, by the way I judged the experience, turned a blessing into a tribulation. Okay, so suddenly, in this realization, I'm back in the lustrous vast again with Michael. And I say, did I get that right? Is that what you're trying to tell me? That I did that myself with my own labeling, the way I framed it? And he said, yeah, you got that. You got that exactly right. And then suddenly, whoosh, I'm back in the timeline again, a little later on. And I'm fighting my granduncle during an actual assault. And during this assault, I disembodied. And so initially, when the assault had happened, I hadn't even been there for it. I had left my form and gone into this mist environment. To my 5-year-old mind, it was clouds. But I don't think it really was clouds, but that's what it was like. And it was very pleasant, soft light. And there were these jeweled beings flying around. They were just radiant, scintillating with light and color. They were bird-like, but they weren't birds. Anyway, so I'm back in this timeline experience in a very weird way, because I had disembodied during the experience itself. And so I'm there observing and re-experiencing disembodying. And now I'm actually aware of what was happening to the body. And I wasn't aware of it up until that point, because I had left the venue. I had gone astral during the actual first assault. So from this, I realized that I had learned I was not my body. As a 5-year-old, I grokked, I am not my body. Check this out. I don't know what just happened. When I got back in my body, I didn't realize what had just happened, but I realized I was not my body, that I had left it for a time. So suddenly I'm back in the lustrous vast with Michael, and I say, did I take a horrific experience and turn it into a blessing by realizing this good information from it? Is that what I did? And he said, yes, that's what you did. You reframed it in a way that made it a blessed thing instead of a horrific thing. He showed me 2 other vignettes from my life, and in both of them, I was doing the same thing again, even though the situation was trying or sometimes desperate. What I made of it, actually, what I said it was, what I spoke it into being, was my choosing. I didn't observe myself doing it at the time. I didn't observe myself making that choice. And as it turns out, this is actually the will I came to summon. The ability to observe myself making the choice of how I frame a situation, which I call lucidity. And it's a shift from being identified as the character to being the observer of the character, able to wield my will to choose the thoughts I teach myself. You see, we go through life teaching ourselves things from what happens in our lives. We say things to ourselves about what it means. And we don't observe ourselves doing it. So we're doing it unconsciously. That means all of those labels we are unconsciously attaching to things are shaping our experience. And because it's unconscious, that is, we're not observing it, we don't have the ability to change it. Until you become conscious of it and observe the process, you can't change it. So until you're lucid in the dream of the world, you really don't have free will. You seem to have free will, but you're acting unconsciously out of conditioning. So in any case, this was all whoosh, the understanding I gained through the NDE. And I realized that all of the suffering in the world, every bit of it, could be alleviated if everyone went lucid at the same time, or if most of us went lucid. That is, we began to take conscious control over what we teach ourselves, what we tell ourselves, what we speak into being for ourselves. And I laughed because what we're doing is we're taking our labels and creating an experience that makes us unhappy. And then we're blaming the world for making us unhappy, but it's the world we made. So we're blaming the world we made with our labels for the unhappiness we suffered. And this is very, very funny because we're godlings. And from that side, it's hysterical that we can talk ourselves into believing that these things even happen to us and then disempower ourselves. We disavow our power with the power of our vow because we're godlings. And when we don't observe ourselves doing that, we can't have a hope of changing it. So at that point, then we began, both of us, to weep at the realization that this is also the cause of all suffering. And that if suffering is ever to be ended, it will be through lucidity. It will be a mass dream of awakening, which is the shift that we're all talking about. It's growing lucidity. It's subtle, the shift to the lucid experience, but it is what empowers you. And it is the will I came into the world to summon. The will that is holy, which is that we all waken within the dream and change it together to the way it could be, to the paradise it could be. So at this point, I said to him, this is also clear. It makes such perfect sense. I must be dying. Am I dying? And he said, well, your body's laying in a field. It's down from head trauma. And if you can't make it stand up, it will cease from brain swelling. And I said, but the world is just a dream. And this was right next to the experience of my perfection when I first awakened in the lustrous vast. This was the next really important insight, that the world is just a dream, that the truth is unity, and everything else is the unity itself, consciousness itself, dreaming the 10,000 things. Okay. So I said, it's just a dream. How do I get back into the dream? And he said, well, you can go back anywhere you like. You can go into the future of that time stream. You can go way into the past. You've already done it in your life review a few times now. You went back into the time stream. You can go back in and stay at any point you like. You can even go back in the moment before the accident occurred, and you can stop it from occurring. But then you won't remember what you learned here because it'll be part of a different time stream, a time stream in which you died, and you won't be in that time stream anymore. So since you want to go back to tell everybody about lucidity, about what you've learned here, the only way to do that is to go back into the last moment. The last moment defines space, time, and every antecedent condition that led to that situation. It's collapsed within it implicit. The last moment contains it all. So in order to get back into the dream of the world that you left, all you have to do is focus on the last moment, immerse your attention completely in the memory of it, and then summon your will to return. At that juncture, I just tried it. I didn't even say goodbye to him. He had reminded me it was very much like I go back into dreams when I'm sleeping in the world. You just focus on them and tunnel back into them basically with your attention. So that's what I did. And whoosh, like a rushing wind is what it felt like to re-enter my body. I was back in my body trying to make it stand up straight away, first thing. And since then, the relationship with Michael has just grown and evolved. That's another part of the story. I don't know if you want to go that far into it. So that's my NDE. I did start trying to tell people about it right away, but it was 1978, and Michael's perspective is decidedly quantum. The idea that all timelines exist and are available in superposition, and you can access any of them anytime, is very quantum. And the world simply wasn't ready for that in 1978, and we're only barely beginning to be ready for it now. So in 2021, 20 to 2021, at the end of 2020, I went through Lexapro withdrawals, and I'd been quiet all this time about my NDE, and the withdrawals were terrible to the point where I was sure I was going to die. And I decided that I had to start delivering the message, because if I didn't, then everything I had gone through would have been for nothing. And so I started doing podcasts and telling people about it, and it's been a wonderful adventure.
All right. For the viewers who doesn't know, we spoke before the interview for a couple minutes, before the recording, a few minutes, and you told me about Michael. Can you explain to my viewers who Michael is?
Okay. Michael is my guide, but he has presented himself as my higher self. He has said to me that he made me from his own energy, from himself, for himself, as a vehicle and grail in this environment. But that I am an independently functioning now soul, and that he is, I've asked him if he's the angel Michael, and he says, no, I'm out of the same energy, but he is a daemon. And a daemon, he explains, is spelled D-A-E-M-O-N, not demon, daemon. A daemon is when an eidolon, that is a temporal incarnation, wakens lucid in the dream of whatever world they're in. And they begin to wield their will to change their experience, to experience their godly estate over what they experience. This leads to a higher level of consciousness and awareness, and a broadening of what we would consider paranormal experiences. As we discover that there is an innerverse, he calls it, that is much grander than the outerverse. So yeah, he is a daemon. He has described himself as my higher self. He says he's basically my husband in eternity. And it's his job to basically aggravate the hell out of me here on Earth. And there's apparently a lot of hell in me, because it's all over the place these days. You just look around after the storms. But we're not here to have a good time. We're here to be tested. We're here to be pushed. We come into this venue for the sake of growing our sentience, and most importantly, developing our lucidity. Because once you're lucid in the dream of the world, you've basically gained your wings, which are a metaphor for the ability to enter and leave venues without falling into unconscious identification with the character you appear to be in that venue. And this is one of the problems that we have now in physics, is there's a informed mixing of the physical with the conceptual. The universe is mental, it's entirely mental, and all of these timelines don't exist in a space. They're concepts. Because they're concepts, they exist simultaneously. They're hypothetical until you focus your attention in them and relive them, like replaying an experience.
All right. So you had this NDE at a young age. You were 18 years old. You're 20 years old, you said.
20.
So how this experience helped you in your life or maybe interfered in your life?
Well, I have to say that there was so much love in the Lustrous Vast and in Michael's presence that coming back into the world, even though at the end of the NDE, I was being transformed by the insights that I was having. I was basically remembering my true self. And I was becoming this much more magnificent being that was all the stories I told myself were stripped away, leaving nothing but this indescribable love. And it is not known in Earth Venue except for by NDEers. I don't believe people really understand that kind of love. And because of that kind of love, I was able to come back into the world. I was committed to deliver the message of lucidity, which Michael calls the liberating perspective. I was determined to deliver that no matter what happened to me, no matter what condition my body was in. It didn't even matter to me because I'm an eternal being, and the love I felt was I had to give this to the world. And it was worth whatever sacrifice I would have to make. As a matter of fact, none of that even mattered. But then you get back into the world, and it's a tremendous reorientation, Sergey. Nobody gets it. People talk to you like they are dismissive of your experience, even though it's the most profound thing you could ever possibly go through. They tend to belittle you over the experience. They negate it. They say it's not real. All of that, which left me basically alone with Michael, okay, because he was there with me and we understood and had the experience together. So it was very alienating to come back into the world after all of that indescribable intimacy, because everything interpenetrated everything else from the Lustrous Vast. There was no separation. And it was distressing. And I would say it took me a good decade to adjust to the world again, and also to not fall into negativity about the way humanity behaves and treats one another. And that has been an ongoing, constant challenge, particularly during these storms, these hurricanes. Hurricanes tragedy either brings out the best in you or brings out the worst in you. And sadly, they're about 50% of the population, it brings out the worst in them. They get me and mine and screw everybody else, and they can get ugly. So the biggest challenge for me has been to remain lucid and to choose to have loving thoughts about people that disappoint me and make me want to fall into anger, identification with some self-talk that makes me angry.
Okay, Cailín, let me ask you this. After this experience, did you ever fear death at all?
No, I'm looking forward to the do-over. Can
You're
hardly
looking,
wait.
okay, you're looking
Can hardly
forward.
wait.
So you've been looking forward to that, to go to the other side since this happened to you when you were 20 years old, or it just began recently for you, this desire?
No, no. It's like I'm. You see, he has said to me. Michael has said to me, this may make me get a little emotional. I was despairing a few years back in 2015, and I was walking around the property in the dark. And I apologized to him for leaving him without even saying goodbye. And his response was that I had made him proud. And he lit me up with Shakti when he said this. And I was like, I made you proud. How can that possibly be? And he said, you saw a way to serve the will that is holy. You saw a way to reduce suffering in the world. You didn't care what you had to go through. And you just rushed back in to serve the will that is wholly shared. And that made me proud. And I mean, he seriously lit me up. I mean, just Shakti just through my body. It was like electric. And that was very comforting to me, you know, and when I choose to do the right thing, when I choose to persevere, when I choose to love people instead of hating them, even people that scare the heck out of me, I feel rewarded by his presence. And it's good to remind myself of that right now, because I have been a little bit dispirited after being hit by 3 hurricanes in 13 months. I'm kind of tired, you know, and revisiting these concepts helps me regain my own lucidity. So I'm grateful for the interview today, Sergey. Thank you.
It seems like you don't want to be in this earth. You don't want to leave this life. Since you were age of 20, you see the other side. How do you go through life? I mean, do you feel like you have something to look forward to on another side? Do you have any pleasures in this life, or nothing compares to the other side? I don't know if I made myself clear. Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
Okay.
The way he has shown it to me, he said, you never left me at all. You never left me. He says, I'm actually still there with him. Just the way I dived down into my life during life review, I relived vignettes of it. He said, all you did is you're in a vignette now. You're in a vignette now. And it feels like a long time to you because it's a long vignette you're living, but you're here with me now. You've never left me. Okay, so stop beating yourself up for that. But beyond that, I have to say, and that's very comforting for me, you know, I'm home in the arms of my dearest beloved, merely dreaming of my exile from heaven right now. Okay. So that's very comforting to me. But there have been developments in the last few years that have been very worth the difficulties here. For instance, when I went through Lexapro withdrawals, okay, let me start a little further back. I'm a writer, and I write fiction. And actually, I should say Michael started channeling a fiction story through me in 1995. And then when I went into revisions, I learned a new way to write. And the way I would write is I would lay down and get into theta brainwave state. And I would do what I call imagifesting. That's very vividly creating a experience of what my characters are about to go through, the environment and the situation interpersonally, the emotions, so that I can write about it convincingly. Okay. And in the book series, there's this one location that keeps repeating. A lot of things happen there, and it is of this locker room. And funnily enough, now I channeled this work originally, so I didn't know where. They call writers like me pantsers. I don't know where things are going. I just write by the seat of my pants. That's why they call them pantsers. And I had been to this actual locker room. I learned to scuba dive when I was 30. And under the natatorium where I learned to dive, there was this locker room. And when I would go to the locker room, it seemed to me like there was an intense feeling of presence, like I could feel Michael much more intensely there. And I would wait for people to leave so that I could be alone and taste that ambiance, try and get a finger on it. And so when I started writing this series, the locker room started showing up in it. And over again, I have imagifested going into that locker room for the sake of writing scenes and rewriting scenes. And so what I have learned in the course of all of this, and if you like, I'll tell you how I figured it out, is that our attention is our godly creative energy, that we are godlings. We are godlings. We're here to learn to control what we manifest, what we create for ourselves and others, okay, through lucidity. Learn to do it lucidly, okay? And our attention energy is, in fact, what creates these things. So when we create characters, we're investing attention in them, and we're actually making sentient beings who live in an alternate imaginifested venue. And these are astral structures. They are in the astral realm. Because the truth is unity and everything is dreams, everything else is dreams, that means all dreams are equally real. All dreams are equally unreal. So to say something that you've manifested isn't real is like nothing is. If it's all dreams, it's all equally real. So yes, what I have discovered is this vast ability to create my own inner milieu. And I learned it during Lexapro withdrawals. I started going into an innerverse, falling into my own consciousness, and I ended up over and over again in this portal. And in that portal, which I thought to be just an imaginary thing at the time, people that have died, I first had to wield my will to make my experience of this place. But then I went into it month after month after month, and it self-animated eventually. I would go in there and everything was acting on its own. And then people that I love that have died started showing up there. I'd go in and there were people that I loved who have passed away, and they were able to access this portal. And I wasn't manifesting them there. This was totally independent of my will. It just occurred. And this made me realize that this is a freestanding energetic structure in the astral planes. The whole universe is mental, so it's in the joint mind space, which means anybody can access it if they know how to set their frequency to match the frequency of that portal. So, the joy that I get is these days more since I started. Michael said, about 5 years ago, deliver your message and your message will deliver you. So in beginning to deliver the message, I've begun to experience real joy in seeing people get it, in seeing people understand, even though it's subtle, that it's vastly powerful, and to take it on board and start using it. I've seen people that I coach, they've said to me, I've gotten more relief out of just a couple of sessions with you than I did at years of psychotherapy. And this is because the distress belongs to the character you thought yourself to be. The psychopathy belongs to the character you thought yourself to be. Consciousness itself is perfect. Consciousness itself doesn't have any of those maladaptations. So when you begin to shift into being consciousness itself, conscious of itself, instead of identified with some story you're telling yourself, everything changes. So my pleasure is in that. My pleasure is in knowing that eventually all of the travails of this particular venue will be over. Not just by me leaving the venue, but eventually lucidity will catch on and people will be able to change the earth by their will lucidly. Only the lucid dreamer can change the dream. So I'm here on a mission to make the world lucid. And in as much as that seems to be working to some small degree, I'm doing what I came here to do. And I'm helping I am summoning my will, because my will, which is what Michael told me I came here to do, summon my will. My will is the will that is holy, which is the dream of awakening. That is the golden timeline. Everyone wakes up and we make the earth paradise by our wills, consciously, lucidly choosing what we tell ourselves and each other. So there's my joy right there. And eventually I get to go elsewhere and I'll be free. I won't fall into identification with some character I play in a world. I can come and go because I have gained my lucidity here. And that is really the point of incarnating in Earth Venue and going through difficulties. It's to become lucid. So you can go anywhere you like without falling into dreams of suffering.
Okay, you mentioned lucid and lucidity several times. Can you elaborate on that? What is lucid and what is lucidity? What do you mean by lucid and lucidity?
Okay. Something happens. Let's say a third hurricane hits your house in 13 months. And you get angry. You get angry with the oligarchs who have, for their personal enrichment, monetized our quality of life by destroying Earth Venue in order to make and sell their products. And your self-talk devolves into this angriness, all right? And you're pissed off and you're experiencing just really being angry that this is the state I grew up in and now it's screwed, okay? It's pretty much screwed. And I'm resentful about that. And I'm having all of this terrible self-talk and I'm living in this upheaval state. And suddenly I observe myself doing that to myself. That's lucidity. This is me going, aha, okay, yeah, I'm in pain. I am talking to myself in a way that just makes the pain worse. Is what I'm saying to myself true? That's what I go lucid. Is it true? Well, yeah, actually what I'm saying about the oligarchs to myself is true. But the next question is it serving you? And no, it's not serving me. So this is what I do whenever I'm suffering at all. First, I become very, very alert. I realize I'm telling myself a story that's making me miserable. I ask myself, what is the story I'm telling myself? What am I saying to myself that's making me feel this way? Then I decide, usually it's not true. The story I'm telling myself isn't even true. And even if it is true, it's not serving me. Okay? And because it's not serving me, I change my mind about what I'm going to tell myself. And I pick a story that is true enough that I can live with, that recasts, reframes the situation in a way that's productive for me. That is lucidity. And it's subtle, but it's very powerful.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, you mentioned the word freedom. Do you mean, what is your definition? Well, actually, this is the name of my show, about freedom show. So let me ask you this.
I know.
What's your definition of freedom, Cailín?
It's lucidity. Until you are lucid, your happiness is completely dependent and hostage to the situation. Whatever your situation is determines your frame of mind until you're lucid. And when you're lucid, you're able to claim whatever mind space you want just by changing the story you tell yourself.
Okay.
That's freedom.
All right. Now, Cailín, if people want to find more about you, about what you do, you said you're a writer, maybe you have a book to mention here. Would you like to do that?
Okay, sure. I have my fiction series, which is, there are 3 so far. There's 6 in the series. If I can ever get done fighting hurricane cleanup, I'll be able to finish the other 3. And that fiction series is The Vampire Grail Affairs. And that is available on my online store, which is crackedpotpublishing.com. I've also written 2 nonfiction works. One, Rise in Lucidity and Master Anxiety. I wrote channeled through Michael, and it is also available there. And then a brief manual I wrote on how to call your pets back from across the Rainbow Bridge into your time stream by way of getting them to reincarnate where you can find each other again. So those are all available at crackedpotpublishing.com. And I'm sure you'll put the link down below. And I also do coaching, cognitive consciousness, spiritual coaching. And you can go to crackpotpublishing.com, scroll to the bottom of the homepage where it says Consult the Lucid Oracle, and schedule a session there with me, multiple sessions there with me. I make audio files. I've made one for the portal, which recreates pretty closely the acoustic environment of that natatorium environment and the portal that's, I mentioned, a freestanding energetic structure in the astral. So I've done that audio file. It takes you into theta state, and it keeps you there, doesn't allow you to completely, unless you're really tired, you're not gonna lose consciousness. It'll keep you usually lucid. So it's for lucid dream induction and for accessing the portal, and that one is called the portal. The portal structure, as I built it, has at the top of the stairs an alternate version of Earth that I call the perfect world. And I made another audio file for accessing the perfect world through the portal. And that's for sale there on crackedpotpublishing.com. And I have another one that is a freebie, Portal of Abundance, that's for folks to usually, I point any clients who come to me at that right away, because it is so helpful in adjusting your energetic, frequency, the kind of self-talk that you're giving yourself. It's laced with subliminals that are all uplifting and positive and self-empowering. My message is really about self-empowerment, and showing people how they can, through lucidity, be self-empowered, so that they can actually exercise their free will instead of being reacting unconsciously and out of their identifications with some story they're telling themselves, and they just haven't observed that they're telling themselves that story. So all of my work is, even the Vampire Grail affairs, teach the same messages. And we wrote that series because a lot of people will not read self-help books. They're not going to watch podcasts like this, but they will read a very sexy, erotic fantasy, and get the lessons that way. So in order to, I'm back on a mission, and I'm like lucidity. I'm leaving little notes all over the venue, wake up, be here now. Okay. You're telling yourself a sad story. You're telling yourself an angry story. Stop doing that. Tell yourself a better story.